This is how I disappear. Chapter 1. Cut off. It was the middle of yet another crisp spring on the island of Sodor. The usually bright green leaves were once again returning to their glory. There was a particular hint from the sun rays, which leaked into the sheds through an old and often leaky roof. In the shed sat a small blue engine, tucked away in the corner of a spotless railway yard. At last, his old eyes lifted, hearing the sounds of his driver and fireman arguing. "And she spilled it all over my newspaper and everything," Martin huffed, letting his still damp newspaper drop wetly against Edward's front, who winced slightly. "I swear that arrogant bitch will be the death of me." "No, it'll be your alcoholism," Alec retorted. "And don't refer to her as a bitch. It makes you sound like a pig." "Exactly," Edward added, between his yawns. "And need I remind you, Alec, you're no saint either. I can't count the number of times I've seen you hungover on the footplate." "At least I don't drink while I'm on the job," Alec sniffed, pointing his thumbs towards the larger of the two men, who cupped another bottle in his hand. "At least he's the fireman, and a damn good one too." "Yes, quite," Edward trailed off, eyeing the newspaper lay sprawled out on his front. Aside from the unwelcome coffee, making most of it illegible, Edward can make out a few things. "An old nuclear power plant is being torn down, He spoke, rather matter-of-factly. "Where's this?" "Birmingham, I think," Alec replied, joining his co-worker in the cab. "Don't worry about that. Remember, we've got a passenger train to take." Edward smiled as he slowly drew out of the shed. The old engine took in a deep and drawn-out breath. Nothing could ever beat living on the island of Sodor. However, as Edward drew out of the platform and crossed over the junction to head down his own branch line, he could never have imagined the hell he and the other engines of the Fat Controller's Railway were to face, starting from that day. Edward brought his coaches into the docks, making sure to stop them carefully. Martin may have been a lousy drunk, but at least he was a damn good fireman. The passengers all did the usual scrambling out of the coaches and strolling down the platform, off to goodness knows where. Rhea, the guard, stood at the end, clearly caring more about her appearance than the train Edward was coupled to. Alex sighed, tapping the gauges carefully. You could never be so sure that they weren't playing up. A tap usually did the trick. Looks like the water's getting low. We should fill Edward up before the return journey. "Mind if I pop into the pub and have a pint?" Martin quickly added, not waiting for a reply, as he scampered away. A usual trick of his. "A sod's law," growled Edward under his breath, "and I thought we were finally getting somewhere." Luckily, as always, Alec had a plan. Rhea was a rather famous Bollywood actress, only using her job on Sodor as a way to boost her image. She and Alec were rather close though, and while Rhea had given Alec acting lessons, Alec had given Rhea fireman lessons, in case of the very situation they once again found themselves in. Alec sighed. "Fucking tosser," he followed. His head darted out to the platform. "Hey, Rhea, Martin's nipped off to the pub again. Do you mind helping me get Edward to the water tower?" "What, am I his personal maid?" Rhea scoffed. "No," came Alec's sharp reply, "but you are a guard who gets slightly extra money on the side to help deal with Martin's shit." Rhea didn't argue, greeting Alec with a snarky smile as she stepped into the cab. Edward smiled. "At least some of us are useful," he chuckled. Slowly, Edward drew out of the station and clanked along the line, backing into the yard which served the dockside. In the distance, large chaperone of Cranky and Salty, the smell of salty sea air, and China Clay hung low. The sight of black smoke seemed to greet the old engine as he strolled in. "Goodness gracious me!" Edward cried, backing to a stop by the water tower. "Are you all right?" The engine Edward was addressing was Boko. Boko looked awful, black smoke pouring up from his engine. Now Edward was aware that Boko's engine had been acting up, but something like this was very unusual for him, despite what some may say about his class. "No," Boko coughed. "I feel dreadful. All upset inside, and Tom says he can't make it better." Not even a second later, Tom came around from the diesel engine, covered from head to toe in black soot. A grin look plastered across his face. "I'm sorry, old boy. No can do." He shook his head gravely. "I hate to say it, but you'll need a complete engine overhaul." "But I've got a goods train to take in half an hour," Boko cried. Tom, who was now joined by Jake, shook his head. "Everyone around here is busy. It could take hours before help could arrive." "What about Salty, or even Raymond?" "No, Salty's busy here, and Raymond's bound to be busy himself." "Maybe I could help," ventured Edward. "My next train isn't due out for 2 hours. Surely they can spare an engine by then." "It's worth a try, I guess," Rhea replied. "I'll go get Martin." "And I'll phone the Fat Controller," Alec added. The two quickly exchanged a high five before Rhea hurried away to the pub, and Alec pulled out his phone. Just on an hour later, Edward hurried down the line, travelling at a brisk pace. The countryside always looked immaculate, and many people would wave as Edward carried on past. He made sure to exchange a passing "hello" at Trevor, who replied with his own smile, but he didn't whistle. Edward noticed Jem Cole examining Trevor's flywheel closely. And while Edward did worry, it was only brief, as he was soon consumed by the marvels of the countryside. At last, his junction came into view. He even passed Molly, heading down the line herself, no doubt to cover his own passenger train. The signals ahead showed green, and the path looked clear. "A nice, uneventful trip," Alex smiled, patting the clearly cranky Martin on the shoulder. "And nothing from those rowdy trucks either." "Yes, and the beer." "Stop! Stop!" Edward yelped. Alec only just reacted, slamming on the brakes with full force. Edward skidded along, stopping mere inches from a diesel engine, who seemed to hurl by with his own goods train. One moment the train was there, the next it was gone. "Bust my buffers!" Edward panted. "What was that?" Something I ought to mention to Control. Or Rosa, whatever comes first. Not long later, the signal changed once again, and Edward slowly ventured away himself, still feeling rather shaken. At last, Edward spoke up once more. "Say, when that diesel passed, did you see the logo on most of its wagons?" "Can't say I did," Alec replied. "I was too busy making sure we wouldn't, be in the train." "Me neither," Martin admitted. "I can't see that far." "I did," came the stern reply. "I was just making sure." "Did it look like the radioactive side?"